be going over how to glaze an oil painting. Today we'll be using a palette knife, some paintbrushes, have a set of oil paints, and then I'm using liquid with fine detail because the consistency is very liquid. You don't want to use the regular liquid because that's a little too thick. And then I have this palette paper underneath that I'll be using to put my paints on. We're going to begin by setting up our palette. For this palette paper, you want to make sure you're using the shiny side. You can move around. It has a waxy film on it so that the liquid or whatever medium you're using doesn't absorb into the palette paper. I like to start off by putting my light colors on the left side and the dark colors on the right side, just to keep my paints organized and make sure they don't mix if I don't want them to. The colors I want to use today are brown and green. So on this side I have cerulean blue and burnt sienna, and then on this side I have French ultramarine blue and burnt umber. These are more cool tone colors and these are warm tone colors, so when I mix them together they'll blend the right. This is the painting we'll be glazing. To start off, I want to start with the background, so I want to make the tabletop brown, and then I'm thinking I'll make the wall like a warm brown. So I'm going to start off with the table. I'm going to use this burnt umber and mix it with ultramarine, a little bit of ultramarine. When you mix these two colors, they turn black. So I'm only going to add a little bit of ultramarine to make sure it's a cool tone brown and not black. You can kind of see like the shade of the brown when you mix it. I like the color. So to create the glaze, you want to create like a 1-to-1 ratio of your medium and paint. I'm just going to pour some out over here. You can tell when you have the right consistency by the texture. So you want it to be translucent. So here it's still a little bit opaque, so I want to add a little more. So here you can see the texture is a little right. Just when you push the paint around, you can tell that it's liquid now. And the whole purpose of glazing is to start off with a grayscale image, oil painting, and then just kind of add these really thin, transparent layers of paint. Glazing is a technique introduced by the old masters. So the purpose was to start off with a grayscale painting. This was to save the old masters a little bit of money and when it came to like materials. So by starting off with the gray image, they saved on the expensive pigments like purple or just anything that really needed like turquoise. So to begin, I'm going to start off preparing my paintbrush. So I'm going to add a little bit of Gamsol. I'm going to wipe some off, and then you want to make sure you take almost all of it out. This is just to make sure that most of the oil doesn't get absorbed into the paint. Once you wipe off the Gamsol from your brush, you want to add a little bit of the medium that you're using, and then you want to use a rag to dry that off. Using a rag is better just because it prevents like any lint from getting in your paint. You just want to wipe the excess off, and then now we're ready to start glazing. So I'm gonna start applying the paint. I guess it doesn't really matter how, just to get a base layer. Just to get some of that pigment on there. And then maybe need more, add a little more. Because it's oil, it'll stay wet and workable. So you don't really have to rush. You also want to be careful when you're going around things you don't want to paint. I'm going to use the side of my brush to make sure I have a clean edge. Okay, once you have your initial first layer of thin paint, it can be splotchy like this. You can use your rag and you just kind of want to put that paint into the canvas. So these layers of glaze are going to be really transparent. The purpose of glazing is for the light to help give the painting depth. So I'm starting to add some color to the wall. And because we're glazing and using really thin layers of translucent paint, the differences will be more noticeable as you work throughout the days. And because we're applying a heavy amount of medium, it's recommended to wait several days. So I would recommend about like, the liquid dries pretty fast, but if you're using linseed oil or a different kind of medium, you might want to wait like a week to begin adding more layers of paint. It's not recommended to layer on paint before the paint is too dry, because the paint will start lifting and separating. So it's best to do it when it's completely dry. Because I'm only doing the background, I can get a little messy with that. And again, like I said previously, you just want to be careful around the shapes that you don't want to get color on. But if you accidentally do get some color, like for this one, you can like quickly fix it by... So I accidentally got some yellow on this part. I want to take a brush. I like to use these stiffer brushes, so you can tell by putting them like this. This one is a synthetic brush, and you can tell if you just run your finger through it, the bristles move pretty easily. And this is a like natural hair brush, so the bristles, they don't move as easy. I don't know if you can see. I'll dip my brush into the Gamsol. Want to remove the excess. You want to clean some off on your rag. And then because the hairs are stiff, they'll easily just remove that paint. And because the Gamsol is a little more liquid than the glazing medium, you can just take your rag and then wipe the excess. And just, if you get close to the edge, you can just dab it off. So that's how you would remove it. And then I want to go in with the rag and then continue just blending the yellow color into the background. And going in circle motions helps with like the texture of the canvas. So this one, you can still see kind of like the grit from the canvas material itself. So you want to make sure you get into every little tiny crevice of the canvas material. And then because this is the first layer, again, like I said, the results will be much better as you continue to layer the paint. So that's pretty much it for the glazing technique. It's very simple. It's mostly about the consistency of the glazing and the medium you choose. Again, working in layers is very important, and I chose to only do the background to start off with because just adding these first few values will help me determine the different hues I want to use for the objects, and then it'll help me start creating that atmospheric perspective. So I will just wait about a week for this to dry. You can use your finger after a while to make sure it's completely dry and then begin adding more layers of glazing.